This is a Sony HX310 mastering monitor that cost more than £30,000. And part of the reason why it is so expensive is because it tracks the ST2084PQ or perceptual quantization EOTF perfectly up to 1000 nits, which is critical to colorists who require absolute accuracy when grading HDR movies. Now, this is a 65-inch Panasonic LZ2000 OLED TV that's priced at just under £3,000. And if we select the most accurate HDR filmmaker mode, then go into the ambient sensor settings to switch off both auto brightness and auto white balance, you will see that our Panasonic LZ2000 review sample also tracked PQ as accurately as we've seen from a consumer television, peaking at around 1000 nits. In fact, if we do a more precise run of measurements with a max CLL metadata of 1000 nits, you will see that there's little to no roll-off here, essentially hard clipping at 1000 nits, similar to what you would expect from a reference mastering monitor costing more than 10 times the price. Of course, the Sony HX310 dual-layer LCD mastering monitor can do 1000 nits full screen with significantly higher color luminance, but we are just bowled over by the out-of-the-box accuracy of the Panasonic LZ2000, bearing in mind that we've literally just unboxed the 4K OLED TV, set it up and switched it on with 0 hours on the panel. Turning our attention to SDR, once we switch to SDR filmmaker mode on the Panasonic LZ2000, disable the ambient sensor settings, and measure the OLED's grayscale against the D65 white point standard commonly used within the film and broadcast industry, you can see that average delta error measured below 1, with a maximum error of only 1.26, which is fantastic out of the box. The default peak white value was also very close to the SDR BT709 reference target of 100 nits. With SDR colors, it is a similar story. On this Color Checker SG chart where 140 patches were measured, we recorded an average delta error of less than 1, with no colors exceeding the humanly perceptible inaccuracy threshold of delta error 3. Again, I need to stress that these are remarkable out-of-the-box results. I've done no calibration on this television at all. In case you are wondering if this particular review sample has been individually pre-calibrated by Panasonic before sending it out to reviewers like myself, there is unfortunately no way for me to prove one way or the other. But all I can say is I've measured similarly accurate Panasonic OLED televisions pre-calibration in the field when I was still offering my professional calibration service before I called it a day to focus on YouTube. However, compared to previous Panasonic OLED televisions, I believe the LZ2000 deserves to be called the most accurate, mainly because of its 1000 nit peak brightness, which permits 1:1 reproduction of HDR content that's graded to 1000 nits without needing to be tone mapped. Once you start rolling off to preserve more bright highlight detail, luminance accuracy will be somewhat compromised, even though depending on the scene, creative intent may still be preserved. Certain quarters will argue that WRGB OLED TVs such as the Panasonic LZ2000 are inherently less accurate than QD-OLEDs, which can maintain high color luminance thanks to the absence of white subpixels. But you have to remember that it is one thing having an innate advantage. It's another thing to deliver accurate luminance and color tracking. For example, despite its superior color luminance, the Samsung S95B QD-OLED actually tends to undersaturate very dark colors, presumably as a consequence of color mapping to rein in the very wide color gamut. The Sony A95K QD-OLED, on the other hand, doesn't reach 1000 nits in peak brightness and suffers from lifted shadows however slightly. The bottom line is, all consumer televisions have their respective pros and cons, and based on my testing, QD-OLED's key advantage lies in screen uniformity that's free from color tinting even off-axis, not outright color and luminance accuracy where the Panasonic LZ2000 and to a lesser extent LG OLEDs with 3D LUT capabilities are still ahead. Anyway, how Panasonic has managed to achieve a peak brightness of 1000 nits on the LZ2000 is through a combination of the latest OLED panel and a heat dispersion layer. Using a Jetty 1511 reference grade spectroradiometer to measure the spectral power distribution, we confirmed the use of a WBE OLED panel, as evidenced by the narrower blue half-width, as well as clearer separation between the green and red peaks. Some other publications may have measured 1000 nits or even higher on previous Panasonic OLED TVs, but for what it's worth, we're using a calorimetry research CR100 calorimeter profile to a CR250RH spectroradiometer with 4nm bandwidth to carry out our measurements on a 10% window at the industry standard of D65 white point. Looking at the charts, the eagle-eyed among you may have noticed that near black gamma on our Panasonic LZ2000 review unit measured darker than reference. This may be caused by a lack of run-in time. We will remeasure after 200 hours of operation to see if this issue goes away on its own. Otherwise, we will use Panasonic's highly granular near black gamma controls to calibrate it out. There is also a new dark visibility enhancer setting in the user menu, but we need to check the levels it affects once we start reviewing the LZ2000 after 200 hours of run-in time. Otherwise, as some of you may know by now, 120Hz black frame insertion has been removed from all 2022 OLED TVs including the Panasonic LZ2000, so black frame insertion is only an on-off toggle, suggesting that it's a central decision by WRGB OLED panel supplier LG Display. For gaming, with input lag set to fast on the Panasonic LZ2000, input lag measured 14.4 milliseconds at 60 frames per second, which can be lowered even more to 9.3 milliseconds once you engage 60Hz refresh rate, which essentially performs frame doubling to 120 FPS, similar to the boost mode first introduced by LG Electronics on its 2021 OLEDs. With a true 120 FPS video signal, input lag measured a super responsive 5.7 milliseconds, which is close enough to the class-leading latency figures on LG and Samsung OLEDs. Due to the MediaTek HDMI 2.1 SoC used, only 2 out of 4 HDMI ports are HDMI 2.1, of which one is the eARC port. Also, just like all 2022 TVs with the MediaTek chipset, 4K 120Hz resolution and Dolby Vision are mutually exclusive, so if you would like to play games in Dolby Vision from the Xbox Series X, you are capped to 4K 60Hz resolution. Design-wise, the OLED screen is supported on a central tabletop stand with a circular base, which can be swiveled, although the largest 77-inch model will have a fixed rectangular one. The Panasonic LZ2000 is equipped with front-firing, side-firing and up-firing speakers tuned by Technics, amounting to the most comprehensive in-TV Dolby Atmos audio package on a 2022 consumer television. As an interesting tidbit, our Panasonic 2000 review sample was assembled in Poland, just like a TCL Mini LED TV we're testing at the moment, so you can connect the dots, even though Panasonic refused to be drawn on the external partner to whom the Japanese brand has outsourced its TV manufacturing. Next, I used a USB microscope to film the Subpixels, but before I reveal an important finding, I would like to thank richardsounds.com for sponsoring this video. If you are thinking about getting a new television such as the Panasonic LZ2000, please consider buying from them through the link in the YouTube description below. Thanks again for your support. Okay, based on a macro shot of the subpixel structure, it seems that the pixel aperture ratio on the 65-inch Panasonic LZ2000 is very similar to that observed on the 65-inch LG G2 OLED, indicating that the LZ2000 is using the latest WRGB OLED panel from LG Display, which is marketed as OLED EX. Now, some of you may be concerned that driving an OLED TV to reach 1000 nits of peak brightness will increase the risk of burn-in. But thankfully, there are two key ingredients in the latest OLED EX panels that help to ward off OLED burn-in, which I have explained in another video you can watch by clicking here.